You're listening to The Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Hello, everybody, and a happy Friday to you all. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today we get to dive into all of the game predictions for week number 6 of the NFL. Last night, or I guess yesterday afternoon, I made my pick for the Thursday night football game. Work life has been a little bit crazy as I move into a new position. All is well, all's going good. I just have to try to figure out how to sort my schedule, I guess, with the way things are kind of working with me at work now. But my goal is to make sure I am getting all the picks out on Thursday. I will just probably need a week or two to get myself settled. So today, Friday, end of the week, we're making picks. I invite you all to comment down below. Let me hear who you got this weekend. What are you looking at for all these matchups here? What do you agree and disagree with? But we will begin with the London game, bright and early on that Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m., I believe, Eastern time, and then so that would be 6:30 a.m. Pacific time, bright and early, as the Jacksonville Jaguars face off with the Chicago Bears. Now, with the London games, you can almost guarantee that this is going to be somewhat of a low-scoring affair. Teams seem to struggle to get past the 23, 24-point margin quite a bit with these games here, and I wouldn't be too shocked if that winds up being the case here, especially when you look at these two teams. Jacksonville's offense did explode last week for 37 points against Indianapolis, well over their 19.5 points per game season average right now, and with Chicago being the defense that they're playing this week, tied for 5th lowest in the league at 17 points per game, I'm not anticipating as high of a score from them. Again, and being overseas, it's probably going to throw things off a little bit, but there is a good chance that Jacksonville maybe does find some success, and that in large part has to do with some of the injuries on the defensive side of the football right now. As it stands, Jaquan Brisker, Zach Pickens, and Terrell Smith are not going to be playing in this game here. Cornerback Tyreek Stevenson's also listed as doubtful for them as well. You have a few other just not as notable names that are currently listed on the injury report as well that are either limited or did not participate in practice guys for Chicago's defense. So there is definitely something worth keeping an eye on there. There could be a little bit of a break in the Chicago defense this week just due to the injury factor alone and also being overseas. Beyond that, though, when you look at Caleb Williams and what he did last week, I feel like he kind of started to turn a bit of a corner going up against the Colts a few weeks ago, and since then, he's starting to figure things out. I would say back half of the Colts game was pretty good, and then obviously you had the week following, not necessarily the greatest performance, and then last week he racks up over 300 yards, and I feel like he's really starting to look like the NFL pro that people were hoping for. I will say that with Jacksonville allowing a league leading at 287 yards per game passing, which is tied for they're also tied for second most in the NFL with passing touchdowns allowed as well. He has a very strong opportunity to build off of that performance last week and potentially really take it to this Jacksonville Jaguars defense. On top of that, Chicago, the last couple of weeks, running the football has been huge for them, averaging about 130 yards per game. Jacksonville's been pretty good against the run for the most part this season, allowing just 4.1 yards per attempt, which is 6th lowest in the league, and they're 6th in yards per game allowed as well. If they can just keep giving the ball to DeAndre Swift, he has the talent. It's just he's got to get the football in his hands, not only on the ground, but also as a receiver as well. I do think that Chicago has a pretty good chance of pulling out this game here. That all being said, though, a reminder that London is kind of a home game for Jacksonville, even if they are the away team in this matchup here. They are kind of like the de facto London team, with all the rumors in the past about them potentially going there and them having spent the most time overseas in London, playing the most games. I do kind of like Jacksonville in this one here. And on top of that, the injuries to the defense of Chicago, which their defense, in my opinion, is the strength of that team overall. Them being depleted on that side of the football for this game here, missing a handful of guys that are significant contributors to it, has me a little bit worried. And with it being tough to move the ball going overseas in London, I don't think it's offenses that are really going to be the biggest factor here. It's going to be the defenses. And if Chicago's coming in, hurt, down a handful of guys, important guys on top of that, I think that does hurt them a little bit. So I'm leaning Jacksonville on this. I have them winning, low-scoring contest, 19-16. Jacksonville has not been perfect. Last week was the first game where they actually looked like a competent football team on offense, and the defense still did not look great with the amount of yards and points that they allowed with Indianapolis going 34 on them. So It's probably going to be a little bit of an uglier contest, I could imagine, just because of the state of the Jaguars and where they actually are. And with Chicago dealing with so many injuries, lower scoring affair, defenses do enough to keep the other opposing offenses down a bit. But this is not a great game, in my opinion. I think this one's going to be a little bit ugly. So if you get up early and it doesn't work out, I'm sorry. Hopefully I'm wrong. I love an entertaining game, especially that early in the morning, but something is just in my gut telling me uglier, lower scoring affair here. Moving into the later games, and by later games, I mean the 1 o'clock games. First one we're looking at here, we have the Washington Commanders going into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. This is a huge test here. We got division leaders going head-to-head. Baltimore currently having the only divisional win in their division, making them the leader in that division at this current moment here, despite being tied 3-2 with the Steelers. First thing I'm looking at here, which defense can slow down the opposing quarterback? Both of these QBs, dynamic playmakers. They can make plays happen with their arm. They can make plays happen with their legs here. There is the conversation around the type of offense that Washington is running right now. And while I'm not going to sit here and speculate on that, it is something that is at least in the back of my mind here. But both of these guys have been electric so far this season. Lamar Jackson averaging 6 yards per attempt rushing. He's ranked number 2 in the league for qualified rushers behind only running back Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then Jaden Daniels, 4 rushing touchdowns. He's got 300 on the ground as well. Both these guys can make it happen with their legs, with their arms. They've been doing an excellent job here. Lamar Jackson, though, really showing off his stuff last week against Cincinnati. Whoever can lock down the opposing quarterback, I think is going to have a really good chance of coming out on this one here. There is, however, a little bit of a discrepancy between the two run defenses here, and I think that is something that could come into play here, as both of these rushing attacks are very successful with strong running backs. Derrick Henry, of course, Justice Hill over there in the Baltimore side of things, but then when you look at what Washington's doing, Brian Robinson, they also have Austin Eckler as well. Two teams, really good running games, really good running backs, but Baltimore, a little bit better, and by little bit, that's kind of being nice about it. Baltimore ranked number 1 in the NFL right now in terms of rushing yards per game, allowing only 60 yards per game, whereas Washington ranked 22nd, allowing 130. That's a 70-yard per game difference right now. I think that Washington's going to be running into quite the opponent this weekend, pun intended there. And for Baltimore, I think defensively, one thing that they really should be harping on here, and with it being a rookie quarterback, I definitely think it's something they're thinking about, forcing Jaden Daniels into making some of those rookie mistakes, or maybe just a boneheaded play here or there with the way they're running their defense, whether it's disguising coverages, maybe coming up with some fancy blitzes to really throw him off here. This is something that I would not be surprised to see from Baltimore. Per Next Gen Stats, Jaden Daniels has the second best completion rate and passer rating under pressure. He hasn't thrown a single pick under pressure as well. He has been sacked 12 times, but clearly from what we've seen against the Washington Commanders so far this season, just getting that to Jaden Daniels and bringing him down isn't enough. You got to get to him. You got to make him uncomfortable and force him into making mistakes. So definitely something I think Baltimore's probably, scheming up their sleeves right now. As for who I think is going to win, this is a tough one here because there's so much momentum riding with Washington at this current moment here, and I really like them right now. But Baltimore, same deal. You start out 0-2, you rip off 3 wins back-to-back, and a big one last week against Cincinnati where it looked like all hope was lost and you weren't going to win that game in overtime, but they got it done. I will say I think that I'm leaning Baltimore on this one. I don't want to say that this is like the game that Washington gets exposed, because I don't think that's what it's going to be. But I think Baltimore is kind of making their way back to where they should be in terms of standings in the league and kind of finding themselves after a couple of tough losses to kick off the season. But they have kind of rounded into form here. I am worried about that secondary a little bit. The amount that Joe Burrow was just slicing and dicing on them last week was a little bit unsettling, but for the most part, I think Baltimore's a legit playoff team. Hell, I even think Washington is too, but Baltimore's rounding into that unit here. I do think some injuries could potentially come into play here, like Brian Robinson. He has not participated in practice this week, and that was something we talked about a minute ago, but like if he can't play, and then on top of that, you're missing a guy like maybe Fedarian Mathis on your defensive line as well. He didn't participate in practice yesterday as well. Like there are some guys on both ends, and then you could even make the same argument for some of the guys that are over there in Baltimore that are currently listed as limited or had not participated during certain days this week. That could also swing things, but for me right now, I'm leaning a little bit Baltimore. Also, the game being in Baltimore makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about it as well. So I'll take the Ravens. Tight contest, 28-27. I think Washington goes down fighting, but they're not going to just go down without one. Moving into the next matchup, we have ourselves a Arizona Cardinals matchup with them heading into Green Bay to take on the Packers. Now, the Cardinals, kind of a thorn in the side of some teams this year, a team that you can't really just count out for a loss here, despite being 2-3 and clearly dealing with some struggles with the talent that they have and just the teams that they're going up against. They have a massive victory that they're coming off of red hot against the San Francisco 49ers last week. And then when you look at Green Bay, yes, they're coming off a win over the Rams, but it wasn't necessarily a pretty one. 24-19. You had a wacky pick six from I almost said Joe Burrow, excuse me, still on my mind, Bengals here. No, Jordan Love with a wacky pick six last week that he threw while he was falling in the end zone. It's been a bit of a rough road for Jordan Love so far this season. Obviously getting hurt the first week, going down in that loss there. Packers don't have him for a couple of weeks. He comes back, kind of a knock off the rust kind of game. And then last week, it kind of felt like he was still knocking some of that rust off. Good news is you're going up against a Cardinals team that, for what it's worth, not quite as talented as some of the other teams that they could be facing at this current moment here, but there are guys that you need to be aware of, you need to take care of going into this matchup here. And first guy on my list is, of course, rookie wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. You have to make sure you know where he is at all times, and he is accounted for. He has 4 touchdowns and 239 yards between weeks 2 through 4. Obviously had a little bit of a slowdown game against San Francisco last week, but he, with how leaky the Packers defense has been this year, could potentially be gearing up for a strong performance here, especially if Kyler Murray's given the time to move around in the pocket and find his guys open. I mean, we have to make sure, if you're Green Bay, that you know where Marvin Harrison Jr. is at all times. For Jordan Love, as I mentioned, kind of a rocky return from injury for him. He has 4 interceptions in 2 games, pick 6 last week, like I had mentioned previously. I would love to see Green Bay lift a little bit of the weight off his shoulders and dial in on the run some more. Arizona has allowed 8 rushing touchdowns this season. They've also allowed the 5th most rushing yards per game. They are struggling to stop people on the ground, as they're a pretty solid running attack themselves offensively, but stopping their opponents from running has been an issue here. And with Green Bay kind of discovering during Jordan Love's time away, dealing with his injury, that they can run the football effectively, you got a guy like Josh Jacobs in the backfield. Lean into that a little bit. I think Jordan Love would benefit from it. It does not have to be a situation where he's throwing for 35 plus times in a game. Let's balance out the football a little bit, help him get his head back in the game, and maybe that, works things out for the offense here. And it also helps you keep the ball out of Kyler Murray's hands as well, because we all know what Kyler Murray can do. And he's been torching defenses so far this season to the tune of nearly 11 yards per rushing attempt when he takes off with the football here. Someone's going to have to be responsible for keeping an eye on him as well, and I'm very curious to see who that is. But that is one thing that you want to do, is try to keep the ball out of Kyler Murray's hands. Best way you can do that, eat up some clock, control the football, run it on the ground. Like, yes, you have Jordan Love. Yes, you have a bunch of really skillful and talented wide receivers. I get that, but I do think that with just the struggles we have kind of seen from Jordan Love since coming back from injury, maybe a little bit more of a focus on running the ball for the time being might be a good thing for him. One big thing to note, though, before we pick a winner here, Arizona, got to make sure you're protecting the football in this game here. Green Bay's defense has been so aggressive coming after the football this year. It's been unbelievable. And you look at a guy like safety Xavier McKinney, who currently has an interception in every single one of the Packers games so far this season. 5 games played, 5 interceptions made. They are going after it. And if you are Arizona, you cannot put the ball in a bad spot. Keep it in your hands. Do not let it go if you're running with it. Kyler Murray can't afford to put the football into tight situations because, again, guys like Xavier McKinney, they're lurking and they're coming after the football here. So take care of it, Arizona, because if you're throwing an interception, you're dropping a ball here or there, I don't know how you come away with a win here. I will say I'm expecting Arizona again to bring the fight to Green Bay. I said that last week going into the game against the 49ers. I said, don't be surprised if they pull off an upset. I expected them to bring a fight. I thought the 49ers would win, but I was not too surprised watching Arizona pull off that victory, because that is something that they have done, not even just this season, but last season as well. It's been kind of their MO, is to keep games tight against opponents it probably shouldn't be, and sometimes they even steal the win doing it. So I'm going to take the Packers, but I'm going to take them 27-26. Again, do not be surprised if Arizona comes into this game and brings it to the absolute limit against the Packers. It's not going to be a blowout by any means. I would be shocked if it is. Now we'll take a look at an AFC matchup, and we are getting ourselves the debut of a rookie quarterback from this year's draft. Drake May will make his start against the Houston Texans, and the New England sports world is on fire about this right now. They are torn right down the middle. As somebody that lives in the New England area myself, is listening to the sports talk radio, works at a sports station myself in television, there is just so much going on right now with the thought process around Drake May getting the start, why he's starting, the plan that was apparently ignored that is being jumped to now way too quickly because of the disastrous loss to Miami last week. There's a lot. Drake May is going to be put to the test, but not only that, this offensive line is going to be put to the test protecting their rookie quarterback. Houston ranks number 1 right now in pressure rate. They are tied for 8th in sacks with 15, 7th in sack rate. They are tied for 4th in tackles for loss. This defensive front in Houston is a literal nightmare, and I really cannot believe that they chose this game to be the game to have Drake May get his first start. Last week was the time to do it if they were going to give him an easier game in, but best of luck to Drake May. Hopefully that offensive line can hold up. Houston has been susceptible, to letting teams run. That is one thing that the Patriots have been pretty good at so far this season, and something they could lean into. They're tied for 8th in yards per attempt allowed at 4.8, and they're 17th in rushing yards per game allowed, tied for 8th in runs over 10 yards or more allowed as well. Ramondre Stevenson's been pretty good. Obviously, he got benched last week, but it ended up being that he was basically the starter anyways. He led the team in rushing attempts, and he looked good. And at 4.6 yards per attempt this season, averaging 7.4 yards per attempt versus Miami with 12 attempts, 4 fumbles, 2 of them being lost so far. The one issue is the fumbles. That's all it is. If he could protect the rock, you're going up against a Texans team that can be, a little bit leaky at times up front, letting guys through. The question is, though, does he actually play? Because he has not participated in practice both Wednesday and Thursday now, so hopefully he's healthy. If not, that could be an issue for them. Thankfully, Antonio Gibson's looked pretty talented himself, or not talented, but looked pretty good himself for this Patriots offense here. But right now, I feel like just trying to do whatever you can to put Drake May in a position where he's not going to see pressure every single time the football is being snapped to him. Running the football might be a good idea. On top of that, I'm not really sure how the Patriots are going to go about stopping C.J. Stroud and company. Even with Joe Mixon probably not playing this week, C.J. Stroud has been killing it. He is top 10 or higher in basically all the major passing stats. You look at the defense of New England right now, they have the 8th worst passing yards per game allowed, and this is after Miami only threw for 179 yards against them. If they had faced an offense that wasn't starting Snoop Huntley against them, I'm really curious to be where they would where they'd actually be ranked on this list here, because it'd probably be even higher. It'd probably be 5th or 4th, something along those lines, if they faced somebody who threw for maybe 250 and had a decent game against them. They also have the 6th lowest pressure rate, despite having the 10th highest blitz rate in the league, which means you are blitzing and you're not really doing it effectively. So there's a lot working against New England in this one here. There is this weird thing kind of going on this late in the week now where people are like, well, what if Drake May just goes off and absolutely torches the defense and the Patriots pull off this massive upset? I'm not seeing that. I like the Texans. I have them winning pretty handedly, 30-15. The last I checked, because I was curious about this, again, I'm not a gambler, but I do like seeing some of the odds because I'm curious to see what the thought process is. A lot of places having the over-under on Patriots points somewhere around 15 and a half. I would not be shocked to see an under on that number hit because they have not looked great offensively. And with Drake May coming in now, it's a bit of a wild card. Yeah, he's a little more athletic. Yeah, he's more physically talented. But that team is still in the current state that they are in. And barring a quarterback change, not much else is different. I don't know how you could be too high on New England at this current moment here. It's exciting, don't get me wrong, but I don't know how you're high on them. Looking now at a divisional clash, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into New Orleans to take off the Saints. Tampa Bay, of course, coming off of what was a heartbreaking loss to Atlanta last week in overtime on Thursday Night Football. New Orleans losing Derek Carr to an oblique injury in the end of their game last week. Spencer Rattler is going to be starting for them. Both these defenses are near the top of the league in passing yards per game allowed, and that could be a positive for Spencer Rattler, something to keep in mind. However, Baker Mayfield on the other side, as I've been saying, bit of a gamer. This dude has been balling out all season long, and you're going up against a Saints defense now that is dealing with some injuries, but also on top of that, they have not really been great at stopping the pass. I'll be curious to see just how much this helps out Spencer Rattler on his end, but I'm expecting Baker Mayfield might have himself a pretty solid performance. Now, one thing to note, the top of that defense in Tampa Bay, we're currently looking at safeties Jordan Whitehead and Antoine Winfield being limited in practice both Wednesday and Thursday. That could be something that the Saints try to take advantage of if both those guys end up missing the game. Just keep an eye on that kind of stuff because those are the things you don't really know until the game kicks off. But there are some notable injuries on the back end of that Buccaneers defense. I would expect that New Orleans probably winds up leaning pretty heavily into Alvin Kamara. Tampa Bay's been about average. They sit I think it's 16, 17 as far as run defense is concerned this year. Kamara obviously with 600 yards on the ground, 602 total yards and 6 total touchdowns this season, averaging 5.3 yards per touch. You're probably going to lean on your running backs. I would expect you're probably going to see a lot of checkdowns to Kamara. You're probably going to see some screens to Kamara. You're probably going to see Kamara running the football a lot this game. I would be shocked if you have Spencer Rattler coming out there and he's tossing the ball 30-plus times in this game. And if you're doing that, things are probably not going well for you. Bucky Irving on Tampa Bay's side, probably want to see him get things going against this defense here, but I'm not really sure how possible that's going to be. New Orleans been pretty good against the run this year. They're ranked 8th with the third fewest 10-yard-plus runs this season, so this will be an interesting game to say the least because the way I see it, it's probably going to be pass heavy for Tampa Bay. For New Orleans, probably going to be run heavy. And then the big question is, if that's the case, how does New Orleans manage to, keep up and not fall behind? Because I don't really know what to expect from this passing attack at Spencer Rattler. It's such a wild card. It's hard to envision what exactly is going to happen there, other than just, you're going to lean on the strength in your running back room. On top of that, with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on that Tampa Bay side of things, Evans has 5 touchdowns this season, 3 in the last couple of games alone. He's been doing Mike Evans type of things as of late. New Orleans going to have their hands full. New Orleans will have their hands full. And then the other thing that I'm really concerned about, too, offensively for New Orleans, just something else that I'm kind of bouncing back on here, is the injuries to the O-line. That is something that is going to continue to hold this team back until they get healthy, which is unfortunate because they looked really good the first couple of weeks. Injuries started to hit them there, and I just feel like this team has not looked the same. And I didn't think the drop-off was going to be this big, but they keep losing guys now, so it's getting worse and worse and worse. Hopefully they can start getting a little bit healthier there and maybe get back to what they've been doing. I like Tampa Bay, though. Their defense has been prone to allowing teams to move and score, so I do think this game ends up being a little bit of a higher scoring affair, even with a rookie quarterback in a 5th-round pick and Spencer Rattler starting for New Orleans. I have Tampa Bay winning 37-20. Expect some points on this one. I think Tampa Bay finds a lot of success offensively, but even the Saints, with just how poor we've seen this defense look in Tampa Bay at times, especially against the pass, they maybe let the New Orleans Saints move a little bit more than they would like to. Now we're looking at here, and this is an interesting game here because you have Cleveland coming in. They're going to Philadelphia. They're in basically what amounts to a tailspin at this point here. Philadelphia, on their end, they're basically trying to avoid that same situation here because they are coming off of a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers we were just discussing in the previous game here. Now, Cleveland has 17 players currently limited and or listed as did not participate between Wednesday and Thursday. 5 of those guys did not participate players. Philadelphia just comes in, obviously off a bye week, so good for them. A little bit healthier than you probably would be typically at this point in the season, with just linebacker Nakobe Dean as the lone player that's been limited in practice for them to this point here. Health alone makes this very difficult to want to lean on Cleveland's side. But you look at Philadelphia and just the way that they have kind of been, it's not been pretty. Like, this game is more difficult of a pick than I think it should be. That being said, you're coming off a 200-yard offensive performance versus Tampa Bay. You only put up 16 points. And on top of that, your defense allowed 33 points in the game and nearly 450 yards total. This is a bounce-back opportunity for Philadelphia. It's just a matter of can they capitalize on it and make that happen. The good news is you're expecting guys like A.J. Brown and, of course, Devontae Smith to come back here. So you're getting all the guys together. Saquon Barkley got a week off to rest. He should be feeling really good coming into this game. And the reason I bring that up is because Cleveland in the last 2 weeks alone has allowed 367 yards on the ground. Barkley averaging 8.5 yards per attempt in the last 2 contests that he's played in, with over 100 yards rushing average in those 2 games as well. You're looking at an opportunity here to really take it to this Cleveland Browns team. I'm also curious to see how Cleveland's O-line fares. The injury issues on the O-line have been a problem since the season has started. They have not had their actual starting 5 guys on that offensive line from the jump this season, and depending on who winds up playing this week is also something worth keeping an eye on here. And Philadelphia, for what it's worth, has not really generated a ton of pressure. They're not racking up a ton of sacks here. So one thing that Cleveland has struggled with is letting guys get to the quarterback. Deshaun Watson's been sacked a league-leading 26 times. So you hope that maybe if you're getting guys back this week, it just depends. Maybe you'll look a little bit better up front on Cleveland's end, but I have a really hard time going with Cleveland right now, especially with the game being in Philadelphia. It makes me feel a lot better about going Philly, so I'll take the Eagles. I really don't know what this game's final score is going to look like. This is one of those games where I sat there for a while and I'm just like rolling the possibilities in my head here of what makes sense to me. And I could see this game going a number of different ways. Definitely one of the tougher picks, and it shouldn't be, but one of the tougher picks in my opinion. I'll take the Eagles 28-16. I think that they find success, bounce back kind of game for them. Cleveland just kind of in the gutter right now, so hurt and in such a bad way. I don't think it's going to be another pretty game for Cleveland, unfortunately. Looking at another divisional clash now, we move into the AFC side of things, but still in the South. We have the Colts heading into Tennessee to take on the Titans. Indianapolis could be without both Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman in this game here, and then there's also the possibility that Anthony Richardson is going to be back in under center rather than Joe Flacco. And whether you think that's a good thing or not, I honestly think it's a valid conversation at this point in the season now. I mean, you look at what Joe Flacco has done in the 2 games that he's gotten to play in. 16 of 26 for 168 yards and 2 touchdowns when he stepped in when Anthony Richardson went down. And then the following game last week, 33 of 44, 359 yards, 3 touchdowns, 75% completion rate with a 8.2 yard per attempt average. I mean, if you're sitting here thinking, man, Joe Flacco should probably just keep starting, like, I get the argument. I really do. The offense has looked good with him there. It's just the defense on the other side has been struggling. And then on Tennessee's end, you have their quarterback conundrum. Will Levis obviously got hurt. Kyle Rudolph stepped in and went from being in a game where things were extremely tight between Tennessee and Miami to absolutely dog walking the Miami Dolphins the remainder of the game once he got in there. Obviously, whether that is him or not, is the conversation to be had here, but they definitely looked like a more functional offense at the very least with Kyle Rudolph there. So now you're looking at, it's Mason Rudolph, isn't it? Yeah, I'm calling him Kyle Rudolph. Mason Rudolph, excuse me. I have Kyle Rudolph written in my notes too. Mason Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph's the tight end. Mason Rudolph, though, since he has stepped in and he looked pretty good during that Miami game, I'm curious to see what they opt to do here. It sounds like it's going to be Will Levis, and I'd be shocked if it wasn't Will Levis. He is the 2nd-round draft pick, but you can sit there and argue, the offense looked better with Mason Rudolph under center. So if again, both these teams kind of in the same conundrum where the guy that's supposed to be starting hasn't looked as good as the backup that came in and took their place for some time due to injury, believe me, I get it. As for the actual matchup here, One thing that Indianapolis has been consistently pretty good at so far this year has been throwing the football. And currently right now they're ranked number 7 in yards per attempt with 7.1 yards per. Alec Pierce, wide receiver, big reason as to why for that. He's currently averaging a whopping 28 yards per reception. Currently, that is a ludicrous number, 28 yards per reception. Granted, he only has 13 catches, but the fact that his average is 28 is insane. Like, everything that he's catching is typically very far down the field, deep type of balls. So Miami ranking as the number 1 pass defense, with Miami ranking as the number 1 Tennessee rather, Why did I write Miami in my notes? I'm all over the place in this one here. Tennessee ranking as the number 1 pass defense in yards per game allowed. The number is skewed a bit because they only played 4 games, and then the Miami game, that's where that came from. And the Miami game, they obviously did not throw a ton, or I guess I should say throw a ton successfully. Snoop Huntley obviously being the quarterback in that matchup here. I think that number 1 passing defense is going to get put to the test here in Tennessee. And then when you look at Tennessee's passing attack, it's been kind of a bit of a nightmare. It's not like it's been anything great by any means, and this is unfortunate because, you have guys like Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins you're supposed to be throwing to. Mason Rudolph, again, provides a solid game, but I really think that for Tennessee to come out victorious in this one here, leaning into the run game a little bit more is probably going to be what you want to do here. Indianapolis has the 2nd worst run defense in the NFL. Leaning on Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears might be your best bet in this one here. I don't really know what to make of Tennessee right now as far as what their offense looks like. And they do have a shot to win this game, in my opinion here. The Colts defense hasn't been great. They're also dealing with a fair amount of injuries right now. When you look at the injury report alone, like Kenny Moore's on there, and you got other guys like Kwity Paye, and not to mention the guys that are missing time right now for an extended period of this current moment. Like, there's injuries that have been dealt to Indianapolis that are making their defense even worse than what was not anticipated, but I didn't really think too highly of them coming into the season, and they're about where I was expecting them to be, unfortunately. So Tennessee absolutely has a shot here. It's just a matter of how do they capitalize on the weak defense of Indianapolis. That being said, though, even without Jonathan Taylor, there's almost a piece of me that hopes Joe Flacco plays for one more game because I would love to just see him have another strong game. I'm expecting Anthony Richardson back as well. With the struggles in Tennessee at this current moment here, even if the game is in Tennessee, I think I'm going to lean the Colts on this one. This is a really tough game to pick, and if you're someone that likes to bet, again, I'm not a gambler, but I will say this is probably a game you'd want to stay away from. It's like a nightmare to decide on because where is Tennessee right now currently with their offense? What is the status of all these guys on the Colts that are just unhealthy right now? This is an awful game to try and pick. I'll take the Colts. I'll take them 24 to 23. I always like to, give that 1 point differential to the games I'm not really sure of because I really think just to really emphasize that I really don't know where this game's going to go. Either one of these teams could win this matchup, and I don't really think there is a clear favorite. If you think there is one, I would love to hear from you, but I don't really think there is one, just considering where these two teams stand currently and everything they've been dealt with so far this season. So I'll take the Colts. Again, 24-23, no clear favorite in my opinion. If it goes either way, I'm not surprised. Now we have over in the AFC West, we're looking at the Chargers heading into Denver to take on the Broncos. This is one of my favorite games this week here, in large part because Denver has looked awesome on defense, and I really love what they're putting together there. But also the Chargers now, who started out pretty strong the first couple of weeks and then just got dealt with injury after injury, finally got a bye week, getting healthy, one that they sorely needed. And now you have the potential of having Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater back on the offensive line. You get both your tackles back. Joey Bosa could potentially be back for the Chargers as well. All things to keep an eye on as far as health is concerned for the Chargers here. But Denver comes in with arguably one of the best defensive fronts in the league right now. And I've been kind of saying that for the last few weeks because they have just looked downright nasty with the guys that they had here. And this was something that I was even kind of anticipating coming into the season too. But they're number 3 in sacks. They're number 3 in sack rate. They're number 4 in pressure rate. They're number 3 in tackles for loss. They are number 2 in run stuff rate. This defensive front, especially that D-line, feels like they can do no wrong with the way that they are playing right now. LA's offensive line is going to have their hands full, and a healthy unit in this game is a must-have. So you are really hoping that you can get Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater back for this game here. On the flip side of things, for Denver's offensive line, they're going to be just as busy on their end, obviously with the potential of facing Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on their side. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because, and this is something that I'll probably keep mentioning week in and week out until this number changes, Bo Nix is a completely different quarterback when he is pressured versus when he's not pressured. The numbers here are pretty insane. In 5 games, when pressured, 17 completions off of 42 attempts. He doesn't even have 100 yards yet. He has a touchdown and 3 interceptions with a passer rating of 26, completing 40.5% of his passes. If he's not under pressure, completion rate jumps up to 69%. And then his passer rating sits at 88 with 2 touchdowns to 1 pick and nearly 800 yards passing. He is a vastly different player when he's not under duress. The better this offensive line can protect him, the better that offense is going to be in the long run this season here. It's very clear that when he's comfortable, he's dicing it up. And it makes sense. I mean, any quarterback's probably going to feel a lot better, but his just the stark difference between him facing pressure and not facing pressure is so big. You've got to make sure that he's comfortable and happy in that pocket. Both these defenses are pretty tough units here. I really think that whatever team wins up front in the trenches on both sides of the football probably winds up winning this game here, and it dictates the outcome. And I think I'm going to take the Denver Broncos. I'm not sure what the entire health status is going to be yet of the Chargers with guys like Joey Bosa, Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater. I think Joe Alt's probably going to play based off of his time spent in practice, but Rashawn Slater and Joey Bosa seems a little bit more up in the air at this current moment here. So that being the case, and even if they do play, just how healthy are they actually is also the other thing weighing on my mind. I just know what Denver's defensive front has been doing. They have been downright nasty. And if even you're missing one of your 2 starting offensive tackles in this game here, that really sets you up in a bad spot. So if the Chargers' entire O-line is there and healthy, Joey Bosa is able to play and he's healthy, I'd feel a lot better about the Chargers. But even being in Denver too, I think I like the Broncos. 24-20, give me the Broncos. Next game, we have ourselves the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, it sounds like Russell Wilson could be gearing up for giving it a go. Whether that happens this week or not really sure. I'm kind of expecting Justin Fields for at least one more week, but it does sound like there's an opportunity that we might be seeing Russell Wilson. So I'm not really sure what's happening there. I hate this quarterback, nonsense that goes on with teams because it makes things so hard to decide. But you also have Aiden O'Connell coming in for the Raiders side. He's going to get his first start versus a very stout defense in Pittsburgh. Both of these defenses have been about the same when it comes to defending the pass. I'll give a slight edge to Pittsburgh. They are a little bit better at generating pressure, getting to the quarterback. They've allowed 2 less passing touchdowns. But overall, they're about the same. Pittsburgh, though, when it comes to defending the run, and the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders literally have the 3rd worst rushing attack in the NFL right now statistically, the O-line has struggled to create lanes. I don't really know how this Raiders team is game planning to move the football. There has been a few instances here and there where you are able to move the football against Pittsburgh, and also not having Alex Highsmith has been kind of hurting them as well. I feel like that's a guy that they definitely miss having running alongside TJ Watt on the other side. But Pittsburgh just does not let teams run the football on the ground. 5th lowest in yards per game, 3rd lowest in yards per attempt. If you're running the football against Pittsburgh, you are grinding to try to get anything on the ground here. And with the way Las Vegas has struggled to put together a decent rushing attack, and they've only had one really good game running the football, I'm curious to see if they're going to be able to even replicate that here. Justin Fields himself coming off what his worst performance of the season, but not a bad performance by any means. It was a little bit shaky in the first half, but he kind of figured it out in the second half. I'm curious to see what happens there, but you have a pretty solid defense over there in Las Vegas that could potentially give you some more issues. I would say that I don't think the Cowboys defense in the current state with the injuries they're dealing with is much better than what Las Vegas has. So it's not coming into this game here you have to worry about too much, but I'll be curious to see what Las Vegas does. Both teams, really long injury reports. a lot of notable key players on both sides that I think, depending on who plays and who doesn't play, swings this game a bit. But if there's one thing I still believe in my heart of hearts, and I always lean on when I'm in these situations of games where there's a lot of weird variables going on, I always stick with the defense that I feel the best about, because I know a good defense can shut things down. And obviously Pittsburgh, love their defense, love what they're doing over there. I don't like that we're now flirting with the change at quarterback, because I feel like sticking with Justin Fields until it looks like a disaster is probably what you should be doing. But classic, you don't lose a job to injury type deal going on with Pittsburgh. If it ends up being Russell Wilson, then it is what it is. But I'll take the really good defense in Pittsburgh, the one I feel like I can trust more. Another low-scoring affair, 20-13 over the Raiders. I feel like the Raiders might be heading in a wrong direction, and I'm kind of disappointed in that, because I thought they'd be in a better spot right now. But opting to not go for a legitimate quarterback during this offseason, whether it was through free agency or through the draft itself, is really starting to show, and I feel like it's going to hurt this Raiders team overall. Now we'll look at a divisional clash in the NFC South as the Atlanta Falcons are taking on the Carolina Panthers, this one being in Carolina. And I've said this already, so I don't really want to dive in the weeds of this too much here. Carolina is a team that I'm going to have a hard time picking as a winner basically this entire season. I feel like every single year that I've done this, there's always like a team or two where you don't really have to think about it too hard as to, do you think this team can win this game or not? Carolina is unfortunately again that team this year where they're going to be in a spot where they're probably going to lose. I would say out of the 17 games they play, most likely 14, maybe 13 if another game breaks their way. But like, I would happily go 14-3 or 13-4, just picking them, expecting them to lose, than trying to like rack my brain trying to find the upset games that they pull out. Like that Andy Dalton first start upset. I mean, is it possible that that game goes that way? Sure. Cincinnati, that was another game, but like the way I see it, Carolina is probably losing a vast majority of their games this year. Atlanta coming off a 500-yard performance from Kirk Cousins. They've had over a week to prep for this game now because they played Thursday night, so they got the extra time as well. Carolina is tied for first in the league with passing touchdowns allowed. They have a hard time stopping the run, nearly almost 145 yards per game allowed. And Atlanta's not necessarily the most effective running offense, but this is a good week to kind of get yourself back on track on that end as well. You couple that with Carolina's injury concerns, and it's like, I can't in good conscience sit here and try to spin up some Carolina upset. I'll take the Falcons. I think they get the job done pretty handedly too, 35-14. That's just going to be what it is, Panthers fans. I'm sorry. That's the best way I can put that. And then we have ourselves, this is going to be a fun one here, Detroit heading into Dallas to take on the Cowboys. This is an important game for both of these teams here. I think the Cowboys kind of need this win, but the Lions, this is a good like kind of prove it type of game, because you're going into Dallas to take on the Cowboys on their home turf. There seems to be some animosity brewing between these two fan bases as well, with their recent history and matchups against each other. So this is one that I'm really looking forward to watching. That being said, you look at what Jared Goff did last week, 2 weeks ago. They were on a bye week 2 weeks ago. Jared Goff, 18 of 18, 292 yards, couple of touchdowns. Perfect game. Somehow not a perfect passer rating, though. How it's not 158.3 and I think it was 155.3. I don't really understand how you don't have a perfect passer rating in that game. Like, what's the criteria? Because you throw 2 touchdowns, you don't miss a completion, and you throw for nearly 300. Like, what am I missing? So curious how that worked itself out here. I feel that's the type of thing where like things like passer rating, it almost makes it feel like bull. But beyond that, Dallas ranking number 10 in the league in terms of passing yards per game allowed. They have been pretty good, but injuries to the defensive line and even in the secondary too is something to keep an eye on, how it affects this team and their ability to slow down Jared Goff and all those guys catching passes from him here. When he's not facing pressure, and the reason I bring this up, obviously, because no DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons might miss this game as well, Jared Goff has 4 touchdowns, no picks, 750 yards, unpressured. So if they can't disrupt him, there's a good chance that Jared Goff's going to be dicing you up. So hopefully they can figure that out on Dallas's end. Detroit, meanwhile, they continue to let teams move through the air as well. I was hoping that we were going to see some decent improvement from Detroit coming into this season here with all the investment that they were making to try to be a better group, especially in the secondary, but they still are really having a hard time generating pressure and sacking the quarterback. It feels like it's like Aiden Hutchinson really dragging that pass rush along on his own. Like, he has 11 of those sacks in one singular game when he racked up 5. So, like, that is definitely an issue, and with the way Dak Prescott's playing, whether he's pressured or not, he's been playing extremely well. But even when he is being pressured, 5 touchdowns, no picks, he's not really having much of an issue. So something tells me the way this game is kind of shaping up to be with these two defenses, we're probably going to get a lot of yards through the air, a lot of points scored most likely. But the differentiator for me is just that the Lions can run the football with the best of them. They are not afraid to ground and pound their opponents in a submission. They have such a good offensive line. And I mean, this team is so healthy coming into this game too. Like, they're probably feeling like they're about to get shot out of a cannon in this game here. I like the Lions in this one to go in, get a big victory in Jerry World, but this is one of those high-scoring affairs, and I wouldn't be shocked if this game winds up being the highest point total of the weekend either. I like the Lions 38-33. The unfortunate thing is that I can't trust Dallas right now, just with the current health situation they have going on with some key players, to really be able to slow and bring down what this Detroit Lions offense can do. But I do think that Dallas has enough firepower in the tank to at least keep pace with them, considering some of the deficiencies we've seen in Detroit against the pass. So I'll take the Lions, but I think it's going to be a lot of fireworks and a lot of fun getting there. 38-33 Detroit. Sunday Night Football. Wow, this is quite a game. We have the 1-4 Cincinnati Bengals heading into New York to take on the Giants. Now, Malik Neighbors still has not practiced to this point and remains in concussion protocol. There is a good shot he does not play this game either. Cincinnati coming in pretty heavy favorite, even being on the road here and at 1-4, finding new ways to lose every single week. And then you have a Giants team coming in who I kind of feel like caught Seattle off guard and in a bad spot with so many injuries on defense and kind of sucker punched them in the mouth and stole a victory in Seattle on top of that. Giants defense will definitely be put to the test against Cincinnati and what they do. Joe Burrow feels like he's kind of finding that groove now. You saw it last week with nearly 400 yards and 5 passing touchdowns. So it seems like the offense is kind of sorting itself out in that front here. But the Giants' strength are in their guys up front on that defensive line and just in that defensive front altogether. You're looking at 22 sacks right now for the season, which currently leads the league. The problem is, though, Kayvon Thibodeau has not participated in practice so far, and on top of that, Brian Burns has been limited. So something to keep an eye on. Those are two guys that you absolutely want to have going up against Cincinnati, especially with the way their O-line has been playing and how Joe Burrow's been getting the ball out quick. They're holding off pressure. They've allowed only 11 sacks this season. You want to have your two best pass rushers in there coming after the quarterback. Cincinnati's defense, though, and this is one of those things where you can look at the Giants offense and you can say what you want about it, but the Bengals defense has not been good and it needs to get better. They're second in points per game allowed right now. They are the second worst third down defense in the league, and they're currently sitting on 7th in total yards allowed per game. Lamar Jackson toasted them last week for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns through the air. If Daniel Jones and that offense, even if Malik Neighbors isn't playing, was to ever have like a good week and a strong performance, it would probably be against this Cincinnati Bengals defense, because they have not done anything in the last few weeks to really make me feel like they're trending in the right direction. It feels like they're trending in a further, they just keep going backwards. So if there was ever a game for like this Giants offense to really shock some people, don't be surprised. This would be the game for them to do it. As for who I think is going to win, I'm going to trust the Bengals on this one. I've been burned by them a few times this season already, but I'll take the Bengals. They have the better offense. I don't think you can say they have the better defense. I think Giants have the better defense here, but it feels like the Bengals might be figuring things out. And again, with the fact that we have some injury concerns now with 2 premier pass rushers on that defense in New York, I feel more comfortable leaning Cincinnati than I do the Giants. But if the Giants pulled this one off, this is another one of those games I would not be surprised, because that Bengals defense has been downright awful. And then to wrap up the week, we are looking at an AFC East clash between the Buffalo Bills going into New York to take on the Meadowlands, not really New York, New Jersey, but Buffalo Bills taking on the Jets in their home turf. Battle for first place in the AFC East. Both teams honestly need this win here. The Bills are sitting on a 2-game losing streak. The Jets are sitting on a really ugly loss in London where Aaron Rodgers threw 3 interceptions. They have their head coach fired now, so they're in a bad way themselves. Both these teams really need a win, and I feel like you could make a case for whether one team needs it more than the other. I'm kind of leaning Jets a little bit more, but if the Buffalo Bills fall to 3-3, that's a 3-game losing skid that they're sitting on after starting the season out 3-0, and that's not a good look for them either. I'll be curious to see how this whole thing operates with Jeff Ulbrich under leadership now, but with a possible change in play calling duties, it's hard because I don't really know how you can envision what the Jets end up doing now. Obviously, it's the same offense. Like, you can't just change schemes. You can't throw out the playbook and install a new one in the course of 3 days since Robert Saleh has been fired. But I do think that there is potentially going to be some wrinkles to how things are called situationally and how that works itself out if that change is made. As of me recording this, nothing has been set in stone, but that is something that's being talked about. Aaron Rodgers, I think for him, if this team wants to win, he needs to just keep getting the ball out quick, get it in your playmaker's hand, and let them do their thing. Like, enough with the deep passes and the fancy things downfield. For him, he's 4th in the NFL right now in time to throw. He gets the ball out quick, and when it comes to that type of thing, you're looking at throws in terms of quick throws, 2.5 seconds or less. Buffalo struggles with those types of throws. They're always allowing big plays off of that. When it comes to quick passes and plays that go 15-plus yards, the Bills are currently tied for first right now in the league with 11 different plays going for 15 or more yards off of those passes that come out in 2.5 seconds or less. So take advantage of that. It's the bread and butter of what Aaron Rodgers does, just getting the ball out, flicking the wrist, and getting it to somebody quick for him to make a play. You have a lot of talented people to work with there. The Bills offense, they're relying heavily on Josh Allen right now, especially with some injuries that they've dealt with here. It kind of feels like he's going to have to be great again this game if they want to pull out a win here. Good thing for him, he has yet to turn the football over. No picks, hasn't even dropped the football once yet so far this season. You currently have James Cook and Khalil Shakir listed as did not participate in practice yesterday. Curtis Samuel was limited, so that obviously has some questions left in the air about who's going to be able to play with you. I feel like this offense definitely missed Khalil Shakir last week, and it'll be good if he can come back, but who knows? If he's not participating in practice, at least the first day, that's not the best sign in the world, so to speak. Josh Allen's going to have his work cut out for him. This is one of the best in terms of passing defenses in the NFL. He's got to be smart with what he does. And then one other thing, and this is going to be kind of a key for the Jets and how I think they could potentially find a victory. Keep an eye on what Breece Hall and Braylon Allen are doing in this game here. Buffalo's run defense has been struggling, especially missing some key guys with all the personnel changes they had this year, injuries they were dealt before the season even started, and injuries that they've been dealing with in the season. This run defense has suffered. They're tied for second in runs that have gone for 10 yards or more with 23, and they're first in yards per attempt allowed. On top of that, 8th most rushing yards per game allowed. Things have not gone great for Buffalo trying to stop the run. I think a good example of that is like the Jacksonville game. Like, yes, they won that game, but Jacksonville was finding success running the football. It wasn't enough to keep up, but they did find some success running the football even later in the game too. So I do think that this is a tighter contest. Both of these teams really need this win right now, but like I said, I think the Jets need it just a little bit more. And there's always that little bit of boost that seems to be a thing where there's like a head coaching change or a quarterback change. You kind of saw it when the Panthers got their win this season when they swapped over to Andy Dalton. It's to the same effect, that same idea, where everyone has just a little bit more gas in the tank because of this kind of change. We'll see if that winds up being the case for the Jets. But I think with how bad they need this win and everything that's gone on this week, they've got to come out victorious here. Because if they fall to 2-4 after firing Robert Saleh, it's like you might as well just blow up the whole thing, because you can't be 2-4 with the expectations you have. I know that's probably partly why Woody Johnson decided to make the change at head coach, but The Jets need this win. They need this win more than Buffalo does, even though going 0-3 in your last 3 games is not a good look for Buffalo. I think the Jets do need this one just to try to keep their season intact and not everything melt down. So I think that gives them a little bit more gas in this one. So I'll take the Jets 23-20 for the victory, and they wrap up week number, 6 now of the season with that W. Those are my thoughts. Those are my predictions for this week. Let me know in the comment section down below. If you're wondering, obviously, my pick for San Francisco versus Seattle was San Francisco. I made the pick yesterday. Obviously, we didn't talk that here. This is being posted on Friday, not Thursday. But that is it. Comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts, your predictions on this weekend's slate of games. If you made it to the end, as always, I greatly appreciate it. I'll catch you all next time. Have a good one.